And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Starting up north here with our first line weather graphic for Wednesday morning. Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, IFR. South of the mountains, so we've got VFR here from the upper Yukon Valley westward right into the Seward Peninsula. Marginal VFR here over the most of the central and eastern Bering Sea, or all of it actually, right into the southwest interior. IFR here, Susitna, Manuska Valley areas, northern Cook Inlet down into Prince William Sound, eastward there to about Yakutat, becoming VFR Kodiak Island, and some IFR pushing into the western Aleutians there, but staying west of Adak. And marginal VFR along the coast, otherwise some VFR over the inside waters of the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, marginal VFR all the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast here, Yakutat to about Cordova, IFR, Prince William Sound, marginal. And marginal VFR here covering much of the interior south of the Yukon River, but becoming VFR here for at least western Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula marginal, good VFR Kodiak Island, improving here from the southern Seward Peninsula southward there across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, but the Kuskokwim Mountains eastward to the Alaska Range marginal. IFR holds Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, and IFR pushing northeastward here towards St. Lawrence Island, marginal for the remainder of the Bering Sea down to the Alaska Peninsula, and also IFR advancing to about Adak tomorrow afternoon. And then for the next day, that area of IFR slips on up toward Nikolsky, and otherwise on Alaska Island, marginal VFR, Pribilof's marginal, northern Bering Sea IFR, up to St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula marginal, no change for the Arctic coast, Brooks Range and North Slope. And some IFR here for Thursday morning, banked up along the north side of the central Alaska Range. We can see quite an improvement here to the south with a lot of VFR showing up, and the southeast coast holding marginal there with marginal VFR right along the coastline westward, kind of in over Yakutat and then over toward Cape St. Elias. And then for Thursday afternoon, this area dissipating, becoming VFR over the inside waters with VFR now, Copper River Basin across Cook Inlet, maybe some marginal VFR over the Talkeetnas, and definitely central eastern Alaska Range and the Tanana Valley there. And the IFR now pulling back to the Arctic coast with marginal VFR across the Brooks Range. Good VFR here, western interior, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, even the Alaska Peninsula, with IFR along the coast of the Yukon Delta, northward there, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait, and central Aleutians westward. Passes, Anatufik and Atigan, expect IFR for both those passes throughout the day on Wednesday. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, marginal also for rainy. Windy starting out VFR, should improve to marginal VFR in the afternoon. Isabel, marginal VFR, and Mentasta also looking pretty marginal, with Tanita looking marginal as well. Portage, IFR becoming marginal. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. And from there, marginal VFR for Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels here, quite a gradient across the southeast coast, 2,000 feet in the north to 10,000 feet there, cutting across Prince of Wales Island toward Metlakatla. And then out to the west here, 2,000 feet now down south of, or actually right off the Yukon Delta coast, 4,000 feet down south of the Pribilofs in the Alaska Peninsula, and about 4,000 feet, give or take, here across much of the interior. Icing, big breakout here over the Bering Sea with this stuff sliding eastward. Could be a band of moderate rime icing up here along the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, with light to isolated moderate pushing into the Panhandle with the main front, and then some leftover isolated moderate, possibly rime or mixed icing here from Bristol Bay northward up to the mid-Yukon River Valley, and then some more icing starting to show up way out there to the west. And the jet stream here, westerly flow across the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, about 60 to 70 knots at 33,000 feet. And this storm at this elevation up over the Copper River Basin weakening as it tracks eastward. A good jet here right across the southeast coast up to 125 knots. And for 9,000 feet, low pressure there just north of the eastern North Gulf Coast. and westerly winds pushing into the southeast coast there. Strongest still offshore there, but about 45 to 55 knots there across the panhandle. And good northwest winds here, 35 to 40 knots there along the southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula area. And then higher pressure out here to the west, somewhat higher. Light westerly flow there, picking back up to about 40 knots ahead of that next system way out there to the west. 3,000 feet, about the same pattern here. Light winds over much of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Higher pressure here just south of the Fox Islands. Low pressure here just south of Yakutat at 3,000 feet. And between the two centers, northwest winds anywhere from 25 to 45 knots here, and west 40 knots west of the southeast coast, much lighter over the inside waters you can see there. And then for the turbulence, look for quite an area of considerable moderate turbulence here. Bristol Bay, down across Kodiak Island, northward to, of course, the Barrens, Kamishak Bay, and possibly down to at least Pilot Point there. And then light to isolated moderate here over the southwest interior, and increasing turbulence here for the north coast of the Panhandle, and not too bad out to the west. Next system way back there towards Shimian Attu with that'll start to pick things up there tomorrow afternoon.